Hi, everybody. Meteorologist Joe Cioffi here on this Saturday night as we take a look at what's going on with the latest on Hurricane Irma. And you can see the enhanced satellite view. You see the eye is very well defined here on the enhanced view as it moves. It's offshore and it looks like it's moving west-northwest parallel to this coastline. And in another couple of hours, it's going to be out over more open water. The structure of the storm remains very sound, and it's really impressive that the storm has been able to maintain its core pretty well in spite of having about half of its circulation over Cuba, but it held together very well. And now that it's moved out over the coastal waters with the full eye there, we've seen the pressure drop very rapidly in the last several hours. We've dropped almost 9 millibars in about 3 hours' time, and there's an Air Force reconnaissance aircraft in there at the moment. Now, even though the pressure has fallen, the winds haven't increased yet, and that's actually not unusual. Sometimes it takes a few hours or maybe even a little bit longer if the pressure is falling rapidly for the winds to catch up, but I suspect that they will as the eye of Irma continues to emerge into the open waters of the Florida Straits, where water temperatures are up near the 90-degree mark in spots, and we are seeing weather conditions continue to deteriorate across much of South Florida. Just looking at some of the wind gusts, and this has been going on for hours in the Florida Keys. We've been seeing gusts into the mid-60s at times. I'll move it around so you can take a look at different spots, but we have lower Matecumbe, south-southeast 33, gusting to 51. Some of these stations do have identifiers, others do not. This particular one does not, and it's 50 gusting to 59. This one does Vaca Key, which is northeast at 44, gusting to 55. And then we are going to move out a little further to the west. The radar echoes are what you see in the background. We have National Key Deer, 24 gusts to 50 from the northeast. And these stations don't, this one might have, this is Key West, which is 25 to 37 from the northeast. So one of the things we're going to look at, by the way, we're going to look for are these wind directions. That's going to tell us where the center is passing. These northeast winds, and we have east winds here, and we have actually more of a southeast wind here being reported south-southeast at lower Matecumbe Key. The eye of the storm is going to pass probably somewhere in here, at least based on these current wind observations. Now, as we get closer, depending on the track, those wind directions are going to adjust and change somewhat. We'll move further east, and we get closer to the mainland, and you got gusts to, again, that's an unknown station, so I'm not getting a report of a locator there. 50, oh, there we go. That's again lower Matumbe. Gust to 45 here. This is Ocean Reef, 27 east-northeast, gusting to 46. And we'll move it up a little bit further up the coast, and we start to get onto the mainland. Some of the offshore stations here reporting like Foey Rocks, 39 gusting to, I believe it's 38 gusting to 44. And further north than that, you get to Miami. We've seen some gusts here into the 30s. Look up further with one of these squalls that went by further up the coast. It doesn't have an identifier here on these stations. But there were some gusts. There's some gusts in the mid-30s and even a gust to 50. And I think hidden behind this barb is a gust to 57, but I don't know what that station is. Plantation, Florida is inland. I can't really read the town names. Maybe if I zoom in a little bit more, I might be able to see it. Okay, so then we're up in the Fort Lauderdale area. Fort Lauderdale International Airport gusting to 37 from the east. They're getting some very heavy rains there where you see the radar echoes in red. And we'll climb up a little further up the coast. So you're getting some gusts up into the mid and high 30s up around Pompano Beach. Then further north we go. Depending on how these squalls come in, will determine the extent of the wind. That's up on the east side, so let me see if we can take it over to the west side here. Let me just widen it out. And sometimes in these instances it gets a little tougher to get the data to come in, so I'm going to just let it load, patiently let it load. And you see the winds are mostly from the east across Florida here. We got a sustained wind at 50, whatever station this is here. That's out just over the coastal waters. And I'll see if I can get a zoom. It'll zoom here. The winds on the west coast right now actually are a bit lighter. We have some gusts up into the 30s in some squalls. This gust to 23 is Rookery Bay near Naples, 12 gusting to 23. So these winds here are nothing, overly exceptional. Naples itself, 17 gusting to 31. So the wind's definitely still favoring the eastern side, the stronger quadrant. You see the stronger winds are over in that particular direction. I want to take a look at the. I'm going to try and take a look, I hope, if this thing is responsive. Let's hope it is. I want to take the storm surge. So I'm going to go to the inundation tool and attempt to pull that up for you. And hopefully, I was not able to get this to work before. So I'm going to hopefully it will do it this time, but it's being very, probably heavily used. But a lot of the storm surge now is actually spread further up the coast around Fort Myers, northward to Port Charlotte, especially in Port Charlotte. It looks like the storm surge numbers there really increased with the track shifting, and also up in the Tampa Bay area. But unfortunately, I can't seem to get this to go. So sadly, unless I can get this, I'll try and zoom in and see if we can get this to pop up somehow. And it doesn't want to. All right, you know what? We'll just have to come back to this another time. In the meantime, let's look at the latest recons. And I just want to go back first off to show you the reconnaissance reports that we had from earlier, when the storm was straddling the coastline. And you can see that the numbers were all coming up, which is what we would expect in a situation like this, when with the eye literally right on the coast. By the way, I am live, so it's hard for me. I'm going to come back and look at your comments in a little bit, but I can't do that and the map at the same time. But you can see how the pressures went: 930, 5, 7, 940, 941. So that's about the high point was probably at around 941, 942. And I'm going to put up the new one now so we can take a look, because we have had 3 passes into Irma now that the eye has moved back out over the water. The storm circulation is still partly over the landmass of Cuba, so it's not, the core of the hurricane is still affecting some of the Cuban inland areas, but that's going to gradually pull out in the next few hours so that the bulk of the core will be offshore, and we could already see that evidence on the satellite view. But here's the new recon pass. In 3 passes, we went from 939 to 935 to 934. So that was a 5 millibar drop in about 2 hours or so, and that is significant. So that's, 2 hours, millibars an hour is rapid strengthening. We'll see if that continues. In the meantime, with respect to the winds, we're seeing large areas of winds of 96, of 83 to 96 knots, and then we're getting these pockets of wind of 96 to 113. I don't see any wind barbs yet above 113, but as the center pulls away with the pressure falling the way it is, I would suspect that when the next mission goes in, we'll start to see some winds pushing up the higher limit. And these winds could increase just, very, very quickly. They don't just gradually increase over a span of many hours. You can just literally be from an hour or inside an hour or a half hour, all of a sudden the winds will just increase and catch up to the pressure. Now, here's the visible satellite view, and we can get the perspective of the eye there. You can see it. It's kind of filled with clouds, so it's not like it was yesterday or when it was at its peak intensity, when you had the eye was, essentially free of cloud cover and very, very distinct on the visible view. It's a little clouded over there, but it's definitely out now over the coastal waters. They're just going to, you're still getting these, kind of slightly westward jogs and then a little bit of a northward jogs. The average motion has been west-northwest, and here's Key West to the north and west of it, about 125 miles northwest of where the eye is at the moment. We'll look at the weather models here, and let's see what they do for the forecast tracks from this afternoon. They actually kind of stayed the same. They're all, look how tight they are. They're all basically on top of each other with the track over or just barely inland or just barely offshore, just extremely close in terms of the overall track. And at this point, outside of probably some wavering of a few miles in either direction, I would not expect to see any huge changes here. But I want to be a little careful because, a little jog of the eye, a northwest turn or northward turn that takes place an hour or two faster could shift the eye eastward by 10 or 20 miles, or in the other direction if it takes an extra hour or two for that northward turn to take place. It could shift the eye a little bit westward, but all of the models kind of fall into this very, very tight range, and then they really don't even widen out very much. So many of them are all clustered up in the track over western Georgia and on up into western Tennessee. And you can see, how the how the model tracks have changed from the East Coast to the West Coast. I mean, we even had offshore tracks that we were still considering just a couple of days ago, and those turned out obviously to be wrong. But the continued correction in this entire event has been to adjust west and south, west and south, west and south. And I would suggest that we would probably be wise to remember that with whatever tropical systems we're dealing with next, which is a hint to Jose, which I really don't want to talk too much about it right now because Irma is really front and center. Maybe I'll address this when things calm down a little bit, but as long as it's not really threatening any land at this point, I just don't want to spend a whole lot of time on it. So we'll go to the wide view, and you can see on the Atlantic satellite the relative size of Irma compared to Jose. Jose is a smaller storm, but it's about the size that Irma was when it grazed the Leeward Islands. Fortunately, the eye of Jose passed far enough north of the northern Leewards where they didn't have any huge problems. Katia is gone now, went into Mexico and has fallen apart. And while you can't see it on this view, I can show you on one of the other views that we have of the eastern Atlantic that we do have another tropical wave that has moved off the African coast, and the Hurricane Center is giving this, by the way, a 40% probability of developing over the next 5 days. So the tropics are remaining active. Tomorrow is the 10th of September, which is the statistical peak of hurricane season, and it kind of matches up with what's going on with two major hurricanes that are on the map. So why don't we now take a look at what's happening with respect to the radars. We'll start with the Key West radar, and you can see the eye very clearly out over the Florida Straits, spiral bands beginning to rotate back westward. They cover all of South Florida now, just south of Miami, the entire southern part of the peninsula, and then those squalls are rotating back westward toward Key West, and you also have some squalls up that are moving a little bit further north of Miami that are in the Fort Lauderdale area. And notice, by the way, these boxes that are showing up, we have I can't tell the color of that red. I'm thinking that is a tornado. Those are tornado warnings, but let me double check on that. before. I'm going to just double check on that real quick. And this is another thing, another variable in all of this that we haven't really spoken about, is the fact that tornadoes are going to be an issue here, along with the flash flooding and heavy rain. We do have tornado warnings out in those boxes that are showing up on the radar. We have weather spotters, confirmed tornadoes being indicated, and this is for northeastern Broward County. I'll just give you the time on this so that if you're watching this video later, you're not confused. This was 6:44 p.m. Saturday, September 9th. We have a tornado warning that is in effect for northeastern Broward County. So severe weather is beginning to break out inside this entire environment that we have with respect to the hurricane. And I suspect that we are going to see quite a bit of severe weather that is going to develop. We have the keys here are highlighted. I wonder if there's some kind of, let me see if there's something going on with that particular area, because it looks like there's some sort of, something's highlighted there. And let's see, they have a tornado warning outline too, but it might be the same one. Yes. Also, by the way, there was one also for southwestern Palm Beach County tornado warning that was issued just a few minutes ago. Again, this is on at 6:41 p.m. Saturday, September 9th, just in case you're watching this. And I don't want you to think that it's current if you're watching this 5 hours from now or overnight or tomorrow morning. But indeed, severe weather getting into part of this equation. Here's the Miami radar, and you can see the boxes of severe thunderstorms, special marine warnings, and tornado warnings that are popping up to the north, and also in and around South Florida down to just northeast of Key Largo in the coastal waters. We have special marine warnings up. These squalls coming in on this band that is beginning to sweep northward, and you can see the core on the radar is right down near the very bottom. The Tampa Bay radar, and we'll look at that because that's kind of on the northern fringe at the moment, and there's not too much happening. You see the northern extent of the squalls on the radar showing up down near Everglades City and Naples. Not too much happening up around Fort Myers to Port Charlotte to Sarasota to Tampa. That is going to change, of course, as we go through the evening hours and certainly during the overnight and on Sunday. So what are the models doing with all this this afternoon and this evening? Well, they haven't really changed too much. You know, slight adjustments. If you want to make an argument that the NAM might have just kind of pushed itself a little bit to the east and the GFS might have just nudged itself a little bit to the west, I suppose that that's the case. But I'm not really, it's not enough to create any kind of issue over. But I'll put the wind field up. This way, at least everybody gets a good picture, a good idea of how the winds are going to evolve in all of this. And of course, the rains are still, going to be significant too in most of Florida. But there's your on the GFS now, and we are. So I can make this a little bigger. I can at least see what I'm saying. Be able to see this a bit better. Okay, so here we are. We are at. My time frames are off. I'm just trying to. It's so hard for me to see what the time images are. Okay, there we are. So I'll do this a different way. Hang on one second. Just bear with me, folks. Let me just move that way. And okay, so I'll back it up. All right, here we go. So now we are. This is at 2 a.m. The red areas are all gales. The red and orange, actually even the yellow, the brownish yellow, you start to get to 32 to 36 knots. So there are your gales, and you can see they're fairly extensive in the coastal waters. The reds, you start to get to 40 knots sustained. You start to go to the purples, and you're talking 50 knots, and then you get into those brighter purples, and then that almost blackish purple color down. That's when where you have your 100-knot winds or higher. This is Sunday morning. The hurricane is basically over the Western Keys with a pressure on the GFS of 910 millibars. So it goes from 936, which is very close to what it is now at 933, coming up on 7 o'clock, and this is at 8 o'clock, 933, 929, 910. The GFS certainly suggests that there's room for strengthening here to at least a strong Category 4, and that pressure of 910 would be supportive of a Category 5 if the model is correct. I think the possibility of it going to a Cat 5 is there. We're just going to have to keep seeing confirmation from the reconnaissance aircraft, obviously, and wait for the winds to increase. But this model's been much better with the intensity, and it's suggesting that with the ideal conditions aloft and the fact that you've got water temperatures in the upper 80s to near 90, should be enough juice to, and there's room in terms of the core of the hurricane being over water, and the fact that most of South Florida is really extremely flat, and you have the Everglades, so the southern part of the peninsula is, washed in Everglades. This is going to hold strength. And then we have it down to 9:01 as it is about to make landfall. The landfall point, I can't really get you. I can't do it accurately, so maybe it's better I just leave it, and we'll just say it's around Fort Myers, Naples, at least on the GFS. And whoops, I wasn't supposed to do that. Sorry. Okay, no, I did it twice. My fault. And here we go with the hurricane inland now. We are at Sunday evening. It actually makes landfall on the GFS at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Sunday, so figure around noontime, just to give us, in case it just kind of wants to inch up a little bit faster, a little around noontime or 1 p.m. Then inland as it goes east of Tampa, St. Pete on this particular run, but it's just a handful of miles really. And then we're up into northern Florida at 8 a.m. Monday morning, still carrying quite a bit of punch. But you see how the wind field changes. At the point that it's making landfall, you've got hurricane force winds well inland on both sides, on both coastlines. And that continues with hurricane force winds on through the day Monday on both coasts. And then the winds start to come back a little bit. The purplish that's all 50 to 70 knots. And then that spreads up into the Georgia, South Carolina coastline as the hurricane continues to hold a pretty strong pressure there of 959 millibars. That would correspond, if you had a 959 millibar hurricane out over the water, you would certainly be producing winds up to close to Category 3 here. But the gradient over land is beginning to spread out a little bit, so the winds are going to be stronger over a wider area, but the strongest winds are going to be diminished. So you're not going to really, you notice how you lose the core of the strong winds instead of being near the center, are actually displaced a number of miles to the east and a number of miles to the west over the coastal waters, and then inland it goes. Still a pretty tight wound up storm in southwest Georgia, so there will be some wind issues here. You see the darker brown, so it's showing sustained winds here of 40 knots or so in inland parts of Georgia. And then finally by Monday evening, then you start to really see those winds drop off under gale force, and then everything starts to relax after that. The NAM is about the same. I'm not going to bother to show it to you. The outcome is going to be the same on the NAM model as it is on the GFS. So just to recap here, it looks like we are seeing Irma strengthening rapidly at this point, and we'll see how this all progresses as we go through the night. I will now join you guys. Let me just scroll back. A big hello to all. I kind of like to do that video and then come back, but it's just, in a situation like this, it's just better to do it on the fly. And with respect to Jose, as I said earlier and yesterday, we're going to see models do squirrely things with it over the next couple of days. So what I'll try and do, if we get a little time, maybe I'll just do a separate Jose stream, and we'll just deal with that. But I don't know if I'm going to have time to do that. Just expect that model to do some strange things. The European did today, and the GFS, and they all seem to be very consistent. Jose is going to be trapped in a basically in no man's land between the Bahamas and Bermuda. The flow is going to collapse. There's going to be no steering to take it out or into any particular direction. A big upper high is going to develop over it and kind of cradle around it. So once that happens, that will respond to that. Jose may actually start moving westward again, closer to the Bahamas and to the east coast of the United States. But what it does from there is anybody's guess. And to speculate about it now is just, it's kind of pointless energy at this point, where we have this Category 3 hurricane coming up the coast. So Delvin is back, hasn't been around for a while. So hello to him, and to David McClinton. Thank you. I appreciate the kind compliment. That's very kind of you. Thank you. And to Mirtha Gunter, Zeuk, and to Ben, who wants to know that if we can get to a Cat 5 with this. Not impossible, Ben. If the structure of the core is intact, and with conditions being the way they are, with a very warm water and an ideal outflow aloft, certainly should be able to get back to a strong Cat 4. I would probably say I'd be surprised if it didn't get at least back to a strong Cat 4. 135, 140, maybe even up to 150. Not impossible. Let's see what progresses between now and midnight when we get the next advisory. If we start to see the winds jumping up to 130, 135, then I think that's going to be a sign the pressure keeps falling at 2 millibars an hour. That's definitely going to tell you that we'll probably have a good shot for a Category 5 here. David McClinton, you saw on the radars, you've got the gales in South Florida and along the Keys, and that's going to be gradually spreading northward. The eye is getting better defined, Sal Pachi. That's correct, and I do see the higher and colder cloud tops develop. So it is the eye is definitely getting better defined now that it's back out over the open waters. I want to see on the infrared satellite tonight if the clouds disappear from around the eye and we start to get that really distinct circular eye like we had during its peak intensity. Awesome Gamer, what you're referring to is the early afternoon GFS run where it did take it there, but that is not going to, that is probably has a 99% chance of being incorrect, and that Jose will be someplace else other than what the model is showing. And if it got it right, it's on the order of a broken clock that far out in the long range. Broken clocks are right twice a day. So you can't really put any value to it. Okay, you just can't. Let's see. Cyan is here, which is good to see you there. To see you here. Awesome Gamer. And latest info on Jose is expected to do a loop. Correct, and then go either west or northwest. But I wouldn't put in there that it's going necessarily toward New York City or any specific point, because we really don't know that. That's what the model did on this run. It didn't do that on the last run, and I guarantee, and it didn't do that on the run that I just showed you. By the way, it took it out to sea. So we've had 5 different solutions in the last 5 GFS model runs over where Jose is going to go. So that's why you can't really put any stock into it. Let's see. Ace A. Well, everybody's trying to be one anyway. Very good line. And being prepared. Yeah, I mean, the damage will be what it will be, and that's something I can't predict what exactly is going to turn out. Bill Gooden, the pattern for Hugo is very similar to the pattern here. Storm near Mexico, Hugo, and a storm off the southeast, and a storm off the southeast of Hugo. I'm going to go back and look. I remember Hurricane Hugo. I don't remember the surrounding circumstances behind it. But when I get some time, I'll go back and look. Jeanette Riddle. I have two sisters trying to ride Irma out. They live in the Fort Myers area, one in the canal and one on the Caloosahatchee. Jeanette, I'm guessing that the local officials suggested that they go to a shelter. I don't know what to tell you. All I can say is, Irma's going to pass. The center of Irma is going to pass very close to Fort Myers, so that should be enough to make a decision. If you read between the lines of what I'm saying, okay. Let's see. Yeah, don't put any stock into specific positions. Remember what I've been saying all along with regards to how to view these models in the long term. Just try to gain the broad perspective of what's happening, and then when we get inside the 7-day time range or less, we can start maybe focusing a little bit on something more specific. And then when we get inside the 5-day, we can really start focusing in on something a bit more specific. Let's see. Fort Myers is going to get whacked. Either way, Ruthless Goat, that's correct. Delvin, Irma would get to Boston in 8 or 9 days. Well, it's not coming up, so we don't have that worry, which is a good thing. I just have a friend left Sanibel Island, first responder, and he's staying in Fort Myers. It's going to be tough down there. It's going to get pretty awful tomorrow morning in parts of in much of South Florida, particularly wherever the core of the hurricane goes in. Some people posting questionable comments reported them in my own view. Great, thank you. I have appointed some moderators to this this group, so hopefully they're probably out enjoying themselves on this Saturday evening if they're not in Florida, because especially if they're up my way, the weather's been so nice. So they will take care of it if they show up later. We had a bunch of nasty people, the nasty trolls on last night, but I got rid of a couple, and we'll clean it up so that everything is just weather related. If you guys have any other questions, by all means, ask away. This has been quite a learning experience, especially from my end of it, because I learned something new with every one of these, and I take that and I take what I learn and then apply it down the road to the next one and the one after. So, it's been quite a learning experience. Who's just asked me about the storm surge? Perugian one. Do I envision a storm surge in Tampa Bay? You know what? While I can't pull it up on the screen, for some reason it doesn't want to load. So you know what? I'm going to go to the Hurricane Center's website. I'll pull up the storm surge tool and I'll answer your question. And just give me a moment here to bring the storm inundation tool up. And I will also post the link here for you as well, so you can use it yourself. So let me just check it, and I can at least describe what the map shows with respect to storm surge. At the moment, the storm surge flooding in and around the Tampa St. Pete area is forecast to be where the water is going to be generally 1 to 3 feet above the ground in and around Tampa Bay. Now that is going to be related to the exact track. So we have to be careful here. If the track shifts a handful of miles, it's going to change the surge forecast. And in fact, the surge forecast for the area in and around Port Charlotte has increased markedly, with much of the area in and around the inlets and the bay showing 3 3 and 6 feet above ground, and even some pockets of 9 feet above ground around tropical Gulf acres, as the map indicates. And I think it's, if I'm reading it correctly, because it doesn't show up too well on the font, it looks like it says Pirate Harbor. I'll try to get a little closer. It's Charlotte Park, that whole area. Punta Gorda is 9 feet, water 9 feet above ground, 6 to 9 feet through all of Punta Gorda Park. I wish the fonts were a little better on this. It's really hard to read them. They should do something to highlight them a bit better. I can actually even see the actual streets on the tool. So I'll put the tool up here for you, and you can copy and paste the link. I think it works better if I take just put the nhc.noaa.gov. So you guys that you should bookmark this, and if you're certainly down in the area in Florida, in South Florida, this is particularly useful for you, so you can actually see what the flooding is like. This hurricane, like Donna, Cat 5, gust to 200. Kenneth, it may get close to Donna's strength. I mean, it may get close to a Cat 5 if the strengthening, that trend that we're seeing right now, continues. There's no guarantee of that. I think it's a good thing to anticipate the fact that it might at the very least get back to a Cat 4. That's not going to take too much from where it is now. And the pressure right now actually would match better a Cat 4 than a Cat 3, but because of the hurricane being having been over Cuba, the wind field is a little bit distorted and diminished. But with the eye over the coastal waters, as the core gets further and further out into the Florida Straits, I would expect to see those winds increase. Adam Barrios, do I think that if Irma's center, the center of the low pressure might get close to, the Florida, the Georgia-Alabama border? That's what it looks like it's going to ride up on. So you're going to get some rains out of this up your way as well. I don't think it's going to shift very much further in either direction. We're just going to have to keep watching the radar. And John Sachs points out that Punta Gorda, Port Charlotte, that's where the Hurricane Charlie hit and did a tremendous amount of damage there. So there are a lot of memories with that particular hurricane for that particular area. Yeah, I just put that surge. I just put the link up here in the chat for those of you with the surge area. So I'm sorry, I forgot. You asked about the fact that your sisters were staying there. Pull up that map on the tool, and you can go basically look at the street they live on to see how much water it might be there with regards to the surge. That might be a convincing factor in making their decision, perhaps a different one from what they have now. They did now. I don't live where they are. I don't know the area, but use that tool to try to convey the necessary information. And we did see Harvey strengthen very fast, so there's no reason why we can't see it again. This is nothing new. These things do happen. Rapid strengthening, you can see these things blow up in just a matter of a couple of hours. Cyan, I think Miami's going to see gusts to hurricane force, maybe a little bit higher than that. They may not see, they may not see it up toward 100 miles an hour, but it could certainly be every bit of 75. With hurricane force gusts, and they will last for on and off for a number of hours. It's just not going to be quick because the storm is inching along. Hello to Jason Schaefer. Hope you're doing well, Jason. Haven't seen you in a while. I use the opacity slider. I tried that, Diane. I tried that on my own on my browser, and I don't know. Something's not working right. It doesn't seem to be. Working right. There's been a lot of trouble with some of these National Weather Service interactive maps today. So, but I'll give it another try in a bit. I'm going to give a quick check to some of the winds. I'll just check the Florida Keys. We're seeing Still seeing, lots of gusts up in the high 50s, low 60s. A lot of sustained winds now showing up at 50 knots or higher in some of the middle keys, and that's certainly a sign that there's probably another strong spiral band that's coming in from off the water. Quite the night we're going to have, aren't we? Yeah, too much traffic right now on the NHC's page. I'll put the tool link up again right now for those of you who need it. It's extremely useful, and you should bookmark it for the future. There it is right there. Yes, I know, Michael McKinney. Too much going on right now. You're right. Fires, earthquakes, floods, hurricanes, you name it. It's all, and you've got what's going on with North Korea. That too. It's way too much. I'm not sure why this is all happening now, and the solar storm. Although at least that gives us something pretty to look at with the northern lights if you're lucky enough to have a clear sky. All right, folks. So here's the plan. I'll see what the weather is doing maybe around midnight. We'll do a midnight live stream tonight, and we'll check to see what the latest is on Irma. And then we'll do it again tomorrow. Tomorrow morning, everything will be going pretty hog wild down in South Florida, so we'll be on top of it for you. We'll do some live streaming tomorrow morning. I'm not going to get up early. I'll just get up at my regular time, which is usually around 7 o'clock. And thank you, Ruthless Goat. I really appreciate it. So I'll get up. We'll try and maybe do a live stream tomorrow morning around 7:30 in the morning, depending on what time I get my lazy rear end out of bed. In the meantime, everybody have a great evening, and we'll see you maybe figure around midnight or so.